It's a big week for Donald Trump, who's staring down a slew of deadlines, mostly symbolic, but which will help set the tone for the rest of his term. The big 100-day mark is this Saturday, which Trump will mark with a Pennsylvania rally. But before that, there's another government shutdown showdown looming with a Friday night budget deadline and a demand from the president that the Mexico border wall be funded, at least partially, in the process. Trump has also promised to put out his tax reform plan this Wednesday. Then there's that health care reform bill and plans for plenty of executive orders in the coming days. Over the weekend, two new polls indicate the president is facing historically low approval ratings as he nears that 100-day mark. An NBC Wall Street Journal poll puts him at 40% approval, and an ABC Washington Post poll has him at 42%. That said, almost no one fares well in the latter poll, which also found 67% of respondents feel the Democratic Party is out of touch with the concerns of Americans, and 62% say the same of the Republican Party. Sounds a lot like November 8th, doesn't it? Joining me are Lila Alphonse. She's the managing editor of news at U.S. News and World Report. Lila, it's nice to see you. And Dan Lothian, his former CNN White House correspondent. Hey, Dan, nice to see you, too.
Good to be here.
Let's start Friday, day 99, and work backwards. If the president refuses to budge on this $1.4 billion down payment on the wall, and the Democrats in the Senate, and he needs some of them, just say no, do we actually have a government shutdown on Friday? And then into the day that's the anniversary of the celebration of his 100th day in office?
It's within the realm of possibility just because everything is right now within that realm of possibility. I don't see it happening.
Why?
It's really difficult to blame the shutdown on the opposition party when your party controls both houses of Congress and the White House.
Well, I think it's made even harder because of comments the president made repeatedly as a candidate. Here are a couple from, I think, January and August. Here's candidate Trump.
The American people will not pay for the wall. Mexico will pay for the wall, 100%.
So you covered this. Now the line is from Sean Spicer, we're going to do a down payment, they're going to pay us back, that sort of thing. Isn't Lila right? If this thing shuts down, Republican president, Republican Senate, Republican House, even if the Democrats in the Senate are the ones that cause the fracture, it's all on the Republicans, right?
It really does fall on the Republicans. And I think, what's sad about this, and we saw the same thing play out in the Obama administration, early on it was on the brink of shutting down, then eventually shutting down. And
2013 most recently.
Exactly. And what happens is that the American people are the ones who get impacted by this. And sometimes I just want to take a step back and say, why can't Republicans and Democrats handle this? Kind of like parents who might be going through a divorce, they're angry at each other, but they do the right thing for the kids.
Yeah.
Kids being the American. Think of the children being the American people, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to get hurt.
Okay, so while you're thinking about the children, why don't you think, what's the tweet Saturday morning from President Trump if government shut down on the 100th day of his term?
I still don't see it happening. But this is a guy who loves to build drama. Everything has to do with how the audience reacts to something. What's the big finale? What's the big dramatic cliffhanger? This is just another opportunity for the something shiny.
Well, let's come back 2 days earlier to another cliffhanger. This is also a tweet, capital letters, big tax reform and tax reduction. There are people in the administration, some saying it's a short-term cut, some it's a long-term cut, some say it's only the corporate tax rate, some say it's the whole thing here. Are they even close to doing this, or is this going to be healthcare 2.0?
Right. I don't think they're close to anything right now. You get the sense that what is happening is that there's this long list of things that he promised he would do, and then they're going through it and saying, okay, 100 days coming up. Let's just throw this out there, because it's one of those things where you can talk about what you tried to do and then blame the opposition if nothing happens, but at least you did something. So it doesn't matter that it's not fully formed, that it's going anywhere. As long as you throw it out there, you can then come back and say,
the point is to show making an effort. They're not looking at context or content or accomplishment or feasibility. That tweet's a great example. Tax reduction for whom? Tax reform in what way? There's no specifics there, and I think that's what we're going to see more of this week. But to his base, with whom he still has a ridiculously crazy high approval rating, they just want to see that he's trying.
You both said that you're trying to. And if this had happened before this Washington Post ABC poll, I would have said you both have no idea what you're talking about. But just look at the thing you're mentioning a minute ago.
92%.
96% of his own voters say they're still with him, still support him. It's only 2% regret the vote. And if the election were held today with the same pool of voters, he would not only beat Hillary Clinton 43-40, he'd win the popular vote. Can you explain that that to me?
I wish I could.
Can you?
I can't. Well,
Can you? Well, go ahead.
A friend of mine is a supporter. It's still, although there are days where he will question what Donald Trump is doing. But anytime you push him, what he says is, he's doing something. And he looks back at the Obama administration and says everything they did was broken, everything negative that you can come up with. But he says Donald Trump is doing something. You may not like it, but he's saying things and he's doing things his way. And they still support that.
Do you buy that?
Well, 66 or 62% of his accomplishments so far in this 100 days have been done by executive order. So never mind the fact.
What? I mean,
never mind the fact that there was
right.
That's the point. Never mind that these things have been enacted but not executed upon. Never mind that some of them are hung up in court. People see that as movement. They see that as effort, and that means accomplishment.
One of the things,
yes.
It seems to me the two major, it's not fair, two of the major accomplishments, I know every night on your old station, they're like, fail, didn't fail, accomplish, whatever it is, but one, he did get a Supreme Court justice confirmed, which is a very big deal.
Yeah.
And number two, and he really can't publicize this as much as I think he should, people illegally crossing the border in February down 40%, in March down 65%, but the reason he can't trumpet it as much as he wants, because then questions like your former colleague Acosta from CNN today asking Sean Spicer, well then why do you need the wall if it turns out you're stopping the flow of immigration? So he's caught between a rock and a hard place there, right?
And I think that describes a lot of the criticism being thrown at him right now. He is caught between a rock and a hard place. If he does actually act on any of these things, then it's not what at least half of the American public wants, and if he doesn't, then it's not what the other half wants.
But then ultimately he can stand up and say, you know what, it doesn't matter that they didn't give me the wall, that they didn't provide the funding for the wall. Exactly. I had the rhetoric, people are scared of me. And look at the numbers. Who can argue with the numbers? So he can still, as we know, Donald Trump is able to find success anywhere, and it doesn't matter that the narrative is going in the opposite direction. He will tout it as success.
But that's a credible argument, is it not?
Oh, it is credible.
Immigration?
Look, there's so much. I always said when I was covering the White House that there are a lot of little gaps within the security of the president. We would go someplace and think, wow, you could have come in right there. But the reason that people didn't come up through that little area is because you think that there's going to be security there, that it's going to be very tight, right? So much of what he is doing is flexing his muscles, scaring people away. If it works, you can say, hey, that was successful.
Now, while we're all paying close attention to this, and I assume most people at home are too, there's one guy, a political guy, who says apparently he's not paying that much attention. Here he is today.
So, what's been going on while I've been gone?
That's his first reappearance, obviously, at the forum in Chicago. The reason I bring Barack Obama up, this is an amazing thing to me. I don't think it's got nearly enough play. Barack Obama speaks to the centrist who wins the preliminary round in France, Macron, and says it's not an endorsement. This phone call was arranged ages ago. And Donald Trump tells the Associated Press, Le Pen's the person, even though I'm really not endorsing her either. Do you not find it weird that the President of the United States is doing a non-endorsement endorsement of a candidate in the French election, and the former President of the United States is doing the exact same thing to the other person?
I do find it a bit weird because, for one thing, normally the president who's just left office doesn't appear, even if he appears in public, it has nothing to do with what's actually going on. It's not.
Well, he didn't mention Trump today, but on this, he did make a phone call to Macron this weekend.
Right, but he's usually not wielding any sort of clout in a visible way immediately after leaving office. And it's also unusual for a sitting president to essentially endorse someone who shares a lot of his worldview.
You covered the president. Do you recollect a moment like this?
No, not at all. And I think you're right. I mean, what we see now of the president, anytime we see him in public, he's on a yacht somewhere floating around. Former president, or he's doing kite sailing or whatever it might be. And he leaves it up to his former White House photographer, Pete Souza, to really sneak out these photos, which are loaded with symbolism behind it, and he doesn't weigh in. So it is kind of odd to see that. But I think for Obama supporters who, are sort of waning nostalgic for the past, and, they like seeing his face out there again.
Happy 95th day.
Oh, thank you to you too.
Happy day 95 to you as
Thank
well.
you.
See you again soon, Lyle and Dan. Appreciate it.